everybody. We're coming on the air with a nation beginning to say goodbye, with lines stretching for miles for a glimpse of the coffin of Queen Elizabeth II at Buckingham Palace. What we're hearing from the people who are paying their respects. Plus, we're 2 days away from the looming freight rail strike. Companies want Congress to step in while workers want sick days. Travelers could feel the pain, too. We're going to tell you about all the routes that Amtrak is canceling tonight. And then California is going after Amazon, a new antitrust lawsuit accusing it of illegally snuffing out competition. Why the state says Amazon's practices actually cost you money. Then an update on a murder case that captured a nation. Why prosecutors in Baltimore say serial star Adnan Syed should be free. And new details in this alleged welfare scandal involving the former governor of Mississippi and Football Hall of Famer Brett Favre. What some newly released text messages show, that is later on in the show. Hey, everybody, I'm Yasmin, in for Hallie. And tonight, people in London, they're streaming into Westminster Hall by the thousands to pay their final respects to the Queen as she lies in state until her funeral on Monday. It is late at night now in London, but that's not stopping people from going in to view the Queen's coffin one by one, all of them getting their chance to say their goodbyes and waiting a long time for that chance. This is just how long the line is to get in. More than 2 miles long, snaking all the way around central London. We saw really big crowds earlier today, too, as her coffin made its last trip from Buckingham Palace over to Westminster Hall, escorted by a grand royal procession. Her family walking right behind her son, King Charles, along with all of his siblings, also Princes William and Harry walking side by side as well. And even though so many people were there to witness it, it was somehow still incredibly quiet, except for sounds of the drums and the trumpet. And condolences also coming in from President Biden, who spoke to King Charles today. The president saying the Queen's constancy deepened the enduring relationship and special friendship between the United States and the United Kingdom. Want to bring in Lindsay Reiser, who's there in London for us, covering it all. And Lindsay, it is important to reiterate amidst all of this that the crowds that we saw today, they're still going pretty strong at this very moment. As we speak, lines lasting up to 30 hours. But people there, they seem dedicated and coming from all over the world to have their moment with the Queen.
Certainly, Yasmin. I mean, the line was moving pretty steadily earlier today, and now there are throngs of people here. The line has pretty much stopped, except it's going much slower. I just spoke to a gentleman who's in line. He joined about 2.5 hours ago, 2 miles up the River Thames. Once they're here where we are, they still have a couple of hours to go, but they are happy to do it. Let's listen to what some of the people told me about why it's important for them to be a part of this moment in history.
We've lost our Nana. That's how we feel. That's exactly how we feel. When Her Majesty passed away, I was in work, and I work in a children's home, and the 2 children that I look after were like, "Why are you crying? Did you know her?" The ages of 9 and 13, and I just went, "No, but I just feel like I've lost a part of my family."
What it means to be British is what you're seeing tonight. It's something it's like a golden thread that the Queen pulled together.
And Yasmin, Her Majesty will be lying in state until Monday morning, of course, the morning of the funeral, Yasmin.
The royal procession, Lindsay, was such an incredibly powerful moment. We saw Prince William and Harry walking behind the coffin. It was pretty reminiscent of the time they did the same for Prince Philip's funeral last year. I believe it was last April. And their mother, Princess Diana's, 25 years ago. An incredibly difficult moment to do so publicly. What message really did this send to the people watching?
Yeah, Yasmin, it was really reminiscent of when Harry and William followed their mother's coffin through the streets of London 25 years ago. It shows that they are united in their grief. We saw their walkabout outside Windsor Castle a few days ago with their wives. And a Queen superfan told me she wished they had done that while the Queen was still alive. She was happy to see them, obviously, together. But it shows us that they are united in their grief. Also notable as we watch that procession that Princes Andrew and Harry were not wearing their military uniforms. Both have stepped back from their roles as senior royals. And we know that a spokesperson for the Duke of Sussex did send out a statement saying that his military service is not defined by the uniform he wears, asking people to refocus on the life and legacy of Queen Elizabeth II, Yasmin.
Lindsay, I know they're going to be starting the rehearsal for the funeral on Monday. What more do we know about how it's all coming together and what to expect?
Well, we can expect not only heads of state from around the world, members of the royal family, members of the British establishment, but of course, people also lining up once again to try and get a peek at the short procession from Westminster Hall to Westminster Abbey, where Her Majesty's state funeral will be held. The funeral will be about an hour. We know that Heathrow flights will be affected that day as well. And then we also know that there will be a procession carrying Her Majesty's coffin from Westminster Abbey to her final resting place at St. George's Chapel at Windsor Castle, Yasmin.
All right, as always, Lindsay Reiser for us. Thank you, Linz. Good to talk to you. So right now, Labor Secretary Marty Walsh sitting down with freight unions and companies trying to prevent a disaster on the railroads because in less than 2 days, workers could walk off the job. They're still behind closed doors, the negotiations, that is, and a Labor Department spokesperson telling NBC News the parties are negotiating in good faith and they are committed to staying at the table. But a strike would impact a lot of workers and could cause a nightmare for the U.S. economy overall. Analysts expecting empty store shelves because stuff coming from overseas could get stuck at port, and it'll hurt passenger trains as well. Starting tomorrow, Amtrak is going to cancel all of its long-distance routes. You can see them here, Chicago to Los Angeles, New York to New Orleans, D.C. to Miami as well. Same goes for Chicago's commuter rail system. It's canceling trains to the suburbs. Why? Because the freight railroads own most of those tracks. Kathy Park is out there for us and reporting on this story. Kathy, we know Amtrak's promising it won't shut down routes in the Northeast, where it gets most, by the way, of its businesses. But what other kinds of disruptions can we expect?
Yeah, Yasmin, I think, the biggest headline coming out of this is the impact on the U.S. economy. I think we Americans forget how much we rely on the rail system. Roughly 1/3 of goods basically rely on this infrastructure to get from point A to point B. So this would have a huge ripple effect across several industries. And keep in mind, we are still feeling the squeeze from the supply chain crisis. So this would only exacerbate the problem. And experts are saying this would cost the U.S. economy $2 billion a day. And of course, we, the consumers, will be feeling it as well.
We don't want to lose sight, Kathy, of what the workers here are actually fighting for, right? They say they're on call basically 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. They don't have weekends. They don't get paid or unpaid sick days. And the anger, it seems, it's so palpable. It's so intense that now the Wall Street Journal, reporting one of the unions that actually reached a deal, said its own members rejected it outright. How real is that anger right now?
Yeah, Yasmin, that's a great question. And that really is a point of contention here as they continue to hash out the deal. So the two labor unions representing conductors and engineers are saying, look, they are dealing with those issues that you just mentioned. And behind the scenes, it really comes down to quality of living. They want to improve that because they don't want to be penalized for taking time off if they have a family emergency, if they need a medical appointment that they need to schedule, because right now those are some of the roadblocks that they are facing because they're on call for an extended period of time, and when they do have to work, they're on the schedule for several days, and therefore they can't take care of their personal matters.
So how is this, Kathy, going to get resolved?
Ultimately, Congress, lawmakers could intervene, but of course, labor unions kind of want to hash this deal out on their own with the companies. Steny Hoyer was quoted as saying that, look, we can pass legislation, but, we are looking at this looming deadline, Friday midnight, and another option would be potentially to extend that cooling off period.
We'll be watching. Kathy Park for us. Thank you, as always, Kathy. Good to talk to you. All right, let's talk Washington for a moment. Senator Lindsey Graham defending his proposed 15-week nationwide abortion ban, right? Saying it's going to take time to get public support, and he's just standing up for what he believes in.
I believe that abortion plan, as Democrats propose, is so out of line with the world, it's so extreme that we owe it to the public to say what we're for.
All right, so this is coming as Republicans on the Hill. They're distancing themselves from the proposal, as it seems, with Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell notably not talking about it on the Senate floor today, and Senators Cornyn and Tuberville saying the issue should be left to the states. Strategists telling NBC the Republicans are trying to keep their focus on the economy heading into the midterms and not on an issue that could actually send Democrats to the polls. Joining me now is Hallie Vitale. Got to say, Hallie, scratching my head over this proposal from Lindsey Graham, considering especially the public sentiment surrounding abortion rights in this country in general, and how Republicans up until now have kind of tried to avoid the topic of the overturn of Roe. That being said, it seems like Lindsey Graham, though, the senator, is trying to keep this thing alive, despite the fact that many of his colleagues are trying to steer clear of it.
Yeah, Yasmin, this is the most prominent action we've seen from a D.C. lawmaker on the Republican side on the abortion issue since the Dobbs decision came down just a few months ago. And you're probably not the only one scratching your head over why this is coming up now. Quite frankly, there are some people wondering if this is sort of an own goal by Senator Graham because of the fact that he's introducing this. And the response from his colleagues, by and large, has been either not to talk about it or to say this is an issue that's best left to the states. And it makes a lot of sense as to why. There are very few electoral data points that point to the impact of a post-Roe reality. The ultimate test of that will come in November. But based on what Democrats have seen so far in special elections in New York, in Kansas, in other places like Alaska, they are feeling like a tide that was supposed to be against them this midterm is actually now working in their favor because of the way that this is galvanizing voters.
So let's show this NBC News poll recently finding essentially majority of Americans, as we were just talking about, disagreeing with the court's decision, Hallie, to overturn Roe. And as you mentioned, obviously, we saw evidence of this. This bore out in places like Kansas, upstate New York, as you mentioned, Alaska as well. So with that being said, Democrats heading into the midterms, how are they kind of pouncing on this opportunity?
Yeah, this is something that they seized on immediately, both in the Senate and then, of course, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi speaking very candidly with me about this today. When I asked her, hey, what does it tell you when you see Republicans trying to almost run away from this? This is what she said to me.
You have to ask the Republicans as to why they poured cold water on it, but they know they are digging a hole and they just keep digging it. What you're seeing there is a conflict within the Republican Party. There are those in the party that think life begins at the candlelight dinner the night before.
So certainly, Yasmin, a fiery response there from Speaker Pelosi, who's never shy in talking about this issue, because to her, she's someone who sees it as, frankly, what it is, which is a stark contrast between the parties on an issue that is central and top of mind for so many voters. Polls tell us that, and of course, our own reporting tells us that too.
By the way, if you're looking to stalk members of Congress, follow Hallie Vitale on Instagram. Always does.
I do that, yes.
Really good job at it. Super stalker, Hallie Vitale. Thank you, as always.
Thank you so much.
All right, police in Boston looking into the explosion last night at Northeastern University as a possible hoax. That is according to law enforcement sources who talked to NBC Boston. Earlier, we learned there was a note inside the Pelican case that actually exploded. You know, those protective cases that you usually put camera equipment in, right? The note criticized virtual reality and Facebook founder Mark Zuckerberg. Police are saying the incident didn't involve an explosive device. They're calling it an overpressurized case. It exploded when a staff member tried to open it, causing minor injuries to that person's hand. Nobody else, thankfully, was hurt amidst all of this. But, of course, a lot of questions remaining. Ron Allen joining us now on this. Ron, what more are we learning from this investigation, first and foremost?
Well, we're learning that there may not have been a quote-unquote explosion at all, that there was a release of energy from this hard Pelican case. We don't know what it contained, and we're not clear exactly who opened it. But the bottom line is that last night there was a very, very tense situation here because dozens of police, investigators, and bomb squads were here on the campus because there was a report of a package exploding. And now, 24 hours later, it may not have been that. There's even some reporting suggesting that investigators are looking at the individual who called this in, who says that there was an explosion. He may not have been telling the truth, and it may be something that was staged or that was something of a hoax. That word has been used. So a lot of uncertainty about exactly what happened. And all of that, of course, adds to the anxiety here on campus because students, faculty, everyone wants to know exactly what was going on here last night, what the level of danger is, if any. And throughout all this, the school community has been trying to reassure everyone that everyone is safe and well protected here.
Let's talk a little bit more about the students and the faculty in general, really the community, right? A couple Boston area universities alerted that there would be this increased police presence while this investigation is continuing. What are you hearing from the students there today?
Some measure of relief, but also some anxiety and a lot of uncertainty about what happened. Again, last night was a very tense situation because it's at 7 or 8 o'clock at night. The students are in their dorms or coming out of their buildings after meals or what have you, and they don't know what's happening. And there's lots of lights and sirens and reports and word that there might have been a bomb planted. It wasn't a bomb, but again, there's that anxiety. Here are some students we talked to who said that they didn't know what to do for several hours when all this was unfolding. Take a listen.
We all think that we have to evacuate, and we run down all of these flights of stairs, panicking just to find out that we're not even supposed to evacuate. We're supposed to stay in place. And then we hide in the bathroom for 3 hours.
But again, today, a much more calm atmosphere. Classes resumed. Things were getting back to normal. But again, all this uncertainty just hanging over the campus as to what exactly was going on last night.
Yeah, I bet. A lot of stress and anxiety amidst all of that. Ron Allen for us. Thank you, Ron. Good to talk to you. Let's move overseas, everybody, I should say, and to Ukraine, where in just a moment of Pride today, President Zelensky was over in Izium, a city in the eastern Kharkiv region his troops just took back from Russia. Pride because less than a week ago, it was under Russian control. But today, President Zelensky said, with our army here again, life comes back. So he saw him meeting and greeting soldiers, inspecting the area, even raising a Ukrainian flag in front of the City Hall building. Russian forces were driven out of here when Ukraine stepped up on their counteroffensive, taking back huge amounts of territory in the country's northeast. But it's not like Russia isn't fighting back. Today, the UK Defense Ministry backed Ukraine's claim that said it is highly likely Russia's now using drones made in Iran. Megan Fitzgerald is joining us now with more on this. Let's talk first about President Zelensky's trip to Izium, Megan. And it seems as if it was a little bit of a mini victory lap for the president there with his troops taking back the territory from Russian forces.
Yasmin, absolutely. I mean, this is really significant for the Ukrainian military. We've not seen this type of victory since the beginning of the war, when Ukrainian soldiers were able to push the Russians out of the outskirts of Kyiv. This counteroffensive launched just 2 weeks ago. They've been able to reclaim some 2,300 or 32, rather. The number continues to change, but the latest number is 3,200 square miles from the northeastern part of the country all the way down to the south. In the Northeast, new reports tonight that the Ukrainians are one town away from reaching the Russian border. So that's some perspective there. Then fierce fighting continues in the southern part of the country, in the Kherson region, where they're able to take back, we're told, dozens of settlements and villages there. Ukraine is on a mission here. They realize that they have no other way out. They have to win this war. They're fighting for their identity. Yasmin?
Let's talk about what it is the British Defense Ministry shared today, which is the possibility, the likelihood, it seems, right, that Moscow, that Russia is getting some of its weapons from sanctioned states like Iran and North Korea as well. What does that say, Megan, really, to the state of the Russian military right now?
The Russians are not in a good place at all. You know, we've been speaking with military experts who say the fact that they are reaching out to North Korea, buying drones, some of them not functioning correctly from Iran, shows that Russia is hands tied, that the sanctions that the West is putting on them is working. And then you look at just the battlefield right now, evidence that these men and women are just fleeing. They're just taking off and running. They're leaving behind fully functioning artillery and tanks, munitions, ammunition, everything left behind. And, you know, when you take a look at the morale of the Russian army, it's fading because these soldiers don't understand what the mission is. They don't understand what they're fighting for, why they're fighting. And then, of course, you look at the Ukrainians, a completely different perspective. They know that they have no other choice. They have to win this war. They're doing it for their families. They're doing it for the future generation. They're doing it so that there is a Ukraine. And they also are trying to take back as much land as they possibly can as we get into those winter months.
Megan Fitzgerald for us. Thank you so much. Good to talk to you, Megan. Coming up, everybody, a new report saying more than 24 states have an election denier on the ballot this November, some of them in huge battlegrounds. We're going to get into how high the stakes are. Plus, federal prosecutors charged 3 Iranians with hacking into computer systems in the United States and globally as well. What they allegedly targeted. That's coming up next. All right, a raccoon walks into a bar. Sounds like a joke, right? But actually, a woman apparently brought it there, brought a raccoon to a bar, by the way. Now health officials are warning everyone at that happy hour about possible rabies exposure. That story's later on in the local. Not necessarily so happy anymore. But first, today, the state of California announcing it is suing Amazon, accusing the retail giant of breaking antitrust laws by stifling competition for years, which then allegedly increased prices for customers across the state of California. Basically, state officials say Amazon used contract provisions to stop sellers from offering lower prices for products on non-Amazon sites, including on the seller's own websites. That in turn reportedly harms the ability of other retailers to compete with Amazon. The suit says if Amazon spots a product listed for cheaper on a competitor's site, it often will remove important buttons like Buy Now and Add to Cart from a product listing page. Those buttons are a major driver, by the way, of sales for companies selling those Amazon through Amazon, I should say, and losing them can quickly hurt their businesses. I want to bring in our Dave Ingram, who's got more information on this. Let's walk through some of this stuff, Dave. Amazon has 25 million customers in the state alone. Break down how this impacts shoppers there and small business owners as well.
Well, according to the AG's office, this impacted shoppers in small ways basically every day for years, and it affected products across the board on Amazon's platform. So a large part of what Amazon sells on its website, on its app, is not products from Amazon itself, but from these third-party sellers. They've had agreements with Amazon over the years to lay out exactly how much they're going to charge while they're selling on Amazon. The allegation here is that these agreements created a disincentive for these sellers to lower prices. Because if they lowered prices, say, on an Amazon competitor or on their own websites, they'd have to offer the same amount of money, the same price to Amazon. The lawsuit cites one case where an electronics manufacturer was asked to pay Amazon $100,000 after trying to sell its products for a lower price elsewhere. So this has been, according to the suit, a daily problem affecting consumers. So without them even really knowing it.
So this is an 84-page lawsuit. It was filed in San Francisco, but if it succeeds, I wonder if it's going to have implications across the country.
This would. I mean, what the California Attorney General is looking for is essentially restrictions on Amazon's activity that would affect the entire United States. Similar lawsuits have been filed elsewhere. There was one filed last year in the District of Columbia. And Amazon just minutes ago put out a statement saying that it hopes that the lawsuit in California has the same result as the one in D.C. The judge in D.C. didn't see that there was enough plausibility in that case to let the case go forward. But in California, this, as you said, this large complaint, Yasmin, has a lot of detail in it from an investigation that went on for 2 years by the California Attorney General. It's going to now move through the courts here in San Francisco.
All right, we're going to be watching as this, of course, plays out, having possible reverberations across the country. David Ingram for us. Thank you, Dave. Good to talk to you. Let's get you over to the 5 things our team thinks you should know about tonight. Number 1, Armenia and Azerbaijan are blaming each other for fighting on their border that's killed at least 150 troops. There has been tension there for decades, but the UN and the State Department are urging calm. Armenia's president saying he has asked Russia for military help. Number 2, a strong typhoon made landfall in eastern China today. It is expected to hit Shanghai as well. Flights and trains have been canceled. Local media is calling it the strongest tropical cyclone there in a decade. Number 3, federal prosecutors have charged 3 Iranian nationals with hacking into computer networks in the United States and other countries as well. They are accused of using software to take over systems and demanding money to stop. Victims included a domestic violence shelter in the state of Pennsylvania, accounting firms in Illinois and New Jersey, and a county government in Wyoming. It is not clear how much money they made from this alleged scheme. Number 4, the founder of outdoor apparel maker Patagonia is giving away the entire company, worth more than $3 billion, to fight climate change. Yvon Chouinard and his family are transferring the entire company into a nonprofit trust. The company's profit, usually around $100 million a year, will now go to efforts to protect undeveloped land worldwide. And number 5, you can start voting today for which toys you think should get into the National Toy Hall of Fame. This year's finalists include things like Bingo, Nerf toys, Catan, and the top online voting ends in a week, and inductees will be announced next month. All right, all systems are a go for November's midterm election, with the last primary races now in the rearview mirror. In New Hampshire today, just hours ago, Republican primary voters chose political outsider and former Brigadier General Don Bolduc as their nominee for Senate. He's going to face Democrat Maggie Hassan. The outcome of that election will help determine which party wins control of Congress. The winner is one of several Republican candidates who have promoted 2020 election conspiracies, falsely denying the outcome of the 2020 presidential election. In fact, 27 states have at least one election denier on their ballot who has pushed the former president's false claims it was stolen. It's critical because these people are running for offices like governor, secretary of state, and attorney general in those states, and elected officials in those seats will help oversee the 2024 election process and certification as well. Joining me now is Mark Morty to talk more about this. Let's talk about some of the concerns here, right, Mark? Because we're talking about election deniers on the ballot in some major battleground states, right? Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Arizona as well. All states, by the way, in which the president won by less than 2 percentage points. So how high are the stakes here?
Incredibly high, and particularly in the races for governor, Yasmin, as you just pointed out. In 2020, we found out that who your governor is, who your secretary of state is, who your attorney general is, does matter when it comes to the certification of a presidential election in the state. But this time around, in the 2022 governor's races, we have candidates like Carrie Lake in Arizona, who's the Republican nominee in that contest. You have Tudor Dixon in Michigan, Tim Michels in Wisconsin, Doug Mastriano in Pennsylvania. This is a very different situation. These people were not the kind of governors we ended up seeing in 2020. And so if a Democrat or a Republican, and in this case, if Joe Biden somehow ends up winning that state again, it goes into question just if these people would actually certify an election in the state that he wins by 10,000 votes or 100,000 votes.
Also speaking, though, to the direction really of the Republican Party, right, because this is just a reflection of the way in which it is moving. These candidates actually obviously were nominated in the first place by Republicans. What does this say about where they are headed?
Well, this actually really reflects today's Republican Party. Yasmin, when we asked a poll last year in our NBC News poll about whether you believe Joe Biden was the legitimate president of the United States, we had some 70% of Republican voters who ended up saying that, no, he's not legitimate. And that kind of reflects many of the nominees we're seeing, not only just for governor and secretary of state, but also for U.S. Senate, for state representative, state senator. And so across the board, you're having a Republican Party where a majority, in some cases a clear majority, are election deniers. And that is the clear direction of today's Republican Party. And it does end up really kind of going to the heart of, can you end up being a fair and neutral in your own kind of being a governor, being a Secretary of State, just doing your job? Can you do it in a fair way if your party doesn't end up winning that election? And I think that is really the fundamental question, maybe the most fundamental question that we're going to see in these races for governor, Secretary of State, and Attorney General.
Mark Murray for us. Thank you, Mark. Good to talk to you. All right, still to come, everybody. The Detroit Auto Show is back, and electric vehicles are a major focus. We're going to take a look around after a break. All right, so today the Biden administration is using the Detroit Auto Show to make more of a push for a shift to electric vehicles. The president announcing today he's approving funding for 35 states to build a better EV charging infrastructure, telling the crowd his administration is working hard to advance the country's future.
It used to be that to buy an electric car, you had to make all sorts of compromises. But not now. Thanks to American ingenuity, American engineers, American auto workers, it's all changing.
The president even tested out some of the cars himself. Here he is driving a new 2023 electric Cadillac. That is also him checking out a new Corvette. He joked with reporters that he'd give them a ride back to Washington, D.C. Orange Corvette. Take a look at that. The president, orange Corvette. Here you can see some of the latest models being shown around today, and it's not just about cars. We're getting a look at other ways people can move around, like small personal planes. What? And hover bikes as well. Jake Ward joining us now. Okay, Jake, fly the plane for us, will ya?
I know. I wish I could do that, Hallie. They do not let us fly the plane on the media day. I don't know why. We talked to them about it. But I do want to show you, if I can, basically the way that the auto industry is changing in 3 models. So this is the kind of concept car you would see at an auto show typically. It's a special kind of Lincoln, you know, for the electric future. But the truth is that electric future is already here. Once upon a time, you would have just sort of wandered around, you know, and been kept from touching those kinds of cars. But now you can get in and sit in these extraordinary, you know, everyday luxury vehicles, $30,000 grocery getters, all of them are being electrified. They're all becoming plug-ins like this one. And the incredible thing is that, I mean, even really iconic stuff, you know, muscle cars, the sort of Dodge Chargers, and the, you know, big gas-guzzling icons, the Hummers, even those are being electrified. And not only that, all of the things that make that possible, right? The new batteries, the new brushless motors, and the new manufacturing capabilities make it possible to build something like this. These personal flying machines. This is like a personal drone, the Air One by an Israeli company. They are going to do, the 200 people have already bought this thing, Hallie. They're going to start delivering them in 2024. For $150,000, you can carry 550 pounds, about an hour, at about 155 miles an hour, right? So the technology is here. Of course, putting it all together into a functional market, that's the next thing. But definitely history is changing before our eyes here in Detroit.
Danny Savalas is already writing a check here on set, trying to get on board with one of those Jetson flyers. Jake, I know you spoke with Secretary Buttigieg. Obviously, the Biden administration certainly wanting to get on board, as we just mentioned, with the promotion of electric vehicles, clean energy overall as well. What did Secretary Buttigieg have to say to you?
Well, the secretary essentially, you know, was here to help promote the Biden administration's efforts to try and put as many electric vehicles on the road as possible and trying to get them all charged as possible. But I basically asked him, you know, how are we going to change a gas culture and a gas-based infrastructure, right? A century of fueling up at service stations. How are we going to change that in a single administration? Here's what he said.
There's no question that the world is going electric. The question is how we make sure that it happens fast enough, how we make sure that it's accessible to everybody and affordable. And, of course, we want it to be a made in America electric vehicle revolution, and we're supporting that with our policies, too.
So, you know, Hallie, it's definitely this sense of you know, real urgency. He feels this urgency. He says the administration is trying to get out in front of this planetary, you know, effort. But it's also about trying to accelerate, you know, an industry that has definitely delivered on the cars, but isn't quite, you know, prepared to spend the billions and billions of dollars it's going to cost to get us all a charger in front of our house the way we're going to need.
Certainly, especially with the promises the state of California has made just in the last couple of weeks as well. Jake Ward for us. Thank you, Jake. Good to talk to you. So if you are a podcast fan, as I am, strap in for this major news out of Baltimore, right? Adnan Syed, the subject of season 1 of the hugely popular podcast serial. If you haven't listened to it, listen to it now, especially with this update. May soon get out of prison. Prosecutors there say new evidence, including 2 other potential suspects, is moving them to ask a judge to vacate Syed's conviction for the 1999 murder of his ex-girlfriend, Heyman Lee. In 2018, an appeals court actually said Syed deserved a new trial, thanks in part to Serial. But Maryland's highest court reversed that decision a year later. The Supreme Court rejected that appeal, too. Syed said that he's innocent. Denny Savalas is joining me now with more on this. What's interesting to me about all this, and by the way, fascinated by this, listen to this cover to cover, beginning to end, is that essentially they're not saying he's necessarily innocent, but that he should be let out because he's served his sentence?
I have to credit the prosecutor's office and other prosecutors' offices who have developed these wrongful conviction units. And really what the prosecutor appears to be saying here is that they want to vacate the conviction and consider, while they continue to investigate, whether they want to try him again, because vacating the conviction brings him back to square one for a new trial only. And the government, the state, has to decide whether or not they want to try Syed again, keeping in mind that they're going to be dredging up evidence from decades ago. It will be a challenge just to prove this, even if they didn't have doubts about the original conviction. But the reason they're doing that is really threefold. They have 3 areas: DNA evidence, the existence of 2 new suspects, and those 2 new suspects are absolutely critical, because it's not the fact that there are 2 new suspects, it's that they may not have been disclosed and they may have been known to the prosecution. That's called a Brady violation. That is a huge problem for the state in this situation. If it's true that the prosecutors at the time knew of these suspects and didn't disclose them. And the third one is the unreliability of the technology then for cell tower. You remember during the series how cell tower location information was critical to the conviction? Well, the technology at the time,
they would say, oh, it would pinpoint the cell, his cell phone to this location, but it's not necessarily an exact location, so it could be feasibly in the area, but when you have cell tower pings, it's not exact.
We are so used to our iPhones, which will tell us exactly where our spouse is on the highway driving home when we check them.
Is that what you do?
I check in all the, and she checks me. Trust me, she's checking me right now.
Sarah.
So that we're used to that now, but really just that cell tower triangulation, that's not the same technology. And it's not that reliable, because your cell phone is just searching for any tower in a storm, and it could ping off a tower that doesn't really give you a good idea of where it is. It tells you you're not in Kentucky, but it doesn't pinpoint exactly where you might be.
Yeah. They also cite other major issues with the case, as you mentioned, kind of the DNA testing, right? Can you expand on that a little bit? And also his attorney at the time, or the attorney that was involved in the case.
Yeah, you may remember from the podcast that the attorney, and of course, you know, there may be 2 sides to the story, but the attorney for his trials was called into, I hate to say it, but called into question about the quality of the representation. By the way, this is something that all convicted defendants sooner or later raise: ineffective assistance of counsel. But it seems, at least according to the podcast, that this was a somewhat valid claim. But the reason, that's not really what the prosecutor or the state is focusing on in this situation. They're focusing on DNA testing that still needs to be tested. They're saying it's not conclusive yet, but we're looking at it. The 2 new suspects that they're not naming.
This is new DNA testing, or DNA testing that had already been done?
I'll say recent DNA testing, not done at the time, but retesting, it appears, at least from their press release that was done in 2018. And then the cell tower information, I think they're pretty much saying it's unreliable. But I got to tell you, 2 new suspects that were known at the time of trial is a huge Brady violation, in my opinion. That means, you know, the government, the state has to turn over all inculpatory evidence that is bad for your client. And if they didn't do that, then that's a problem. They have to turn over all exculpatory evidence, too, evidence that may exonerate your client. And if you don't do that, and you're the state, you're risking your conviction.
So where do you think they're going to land on this?
Here's what I think. I think they're going to wait and investigate, and they're asking for him to be released on a murder trial. When you think about it, it is amazing. So all in all, good things. But I have to let a little bit of jaded defense attorney sneak in. Just keep in mind, in Maryland, they have a wrongful conviction statute where you can sue the state for wrongfully convicting you, but it requires what's called actual innocence. And note that the state's attorney here is saying, we're not saying he's innocent yet. So I hate to be jaded, but that might be a financial motivation behind holding out on declaring him innocent.
Where's your wife now?
She is on the FDR heading home, hopefully with dinner.
Dana Savalas, as always. Great to have you on. All right, so just as we're on the air, Chicago jury deciding that former R&B singer R. Kelly is guilty on 6 counts of child pornography. He was found not guilty of 7 other charges. Yesterday, prosecutors told jurors Kelly committed, quote, crimes against children, while his lawyer asked jurors to put aside what they know about Kelly and just focus on the evidence heard in the trial. It's coming after about a month of testimony where the court heard from multiple women who alleged that Kelly had sex with them when they were minors. As for the prosecutors, they argued that Kelly did this, but also recorded a number of these assaults and paid people who knew about this to keep them quiet at his 2008 trial. Shaq Brewster is joining me now with more on this. A lot to digest with this verdict, Shaq. What's standing out to you?
Yeah, a lot of material that jurors went through as they came to this verdict. And the big thing is that this is a split decision, but the jury is finding R. Kelly guilty of some key counts related to child pornography. In 3 of the 4 counts that he was facing connected to charging the singer of sexual exploitation for the purposes of producing child pornography, he was found guilty. He was acquitted of another count. In terms of the split decision that we see in the verdict sheet, 5 of the counts that Kelly was facing of the 13 connected to obstruction of justice. The prosecution throughout this case said that he was having sex with minors, that he recorded many of the alleged assaults, and that he paid people to keep quiet about those recordings. The jury acquitting him of that last part, showing that or suggesting that there was not enough evidence to suggest that he was trying to keep quiet about the assault that were recorded on camera. But the big thing here, 3 counts, 3 guilty counts of the big charges against him in terms of producing child pornography.
All right, Shaq Brewster for us. Certainly some breaking news this hour with the verdict with R. Kelly. Appreciate it, Shaq. Thanks for jumping on this. Coming up, everybody, lawmakers grilling some members of the Biden administration about the federal response to the monkeypox outbreak. What officials are saying about the spread after the break. All right, so NBC covers hundreds of stories each day, and because you could not possibly read, watch, or listen to them all, our bureau teams have done it for you. This is what they tell us is going down in their regions in a segment that we call The Local. From our West Coast bureau, crews in Northern California are battling the so-called mosquito fire. It's threatening 2 towns. It's destroyed cars and dozens of structures, and even got close to a high school. The fires burned more than 60,000 acres so far, and the windy, dry conditions that have been fueling it are still expected for the next couple of days. From our Northeast Bureau, the Boston Athletic Association says non-binary athletes will be allowed to run in next year's Boston Marathon without having to register as members of the men's or women's divisions. After their announcement, the London Marathon announced today that it's also going to have a non-binary category. And from our Midwest Bureau, a bartender in North Dakota says someone brought a raccoon to a happy hour. Now, health officials in the town, that's about 85 miles from the Canadian border, are telling anyone who was there and was maybe in contact with its saliva to seek medical treatment. Maybe not so happy hour anymore. The bartender told local media the woman with the raccoon was in there for just a couple of minutes. I wonder what she drank. Today, the nation's top public health leaders testified in front of a Senate committee about the state of the monkeypox outbreak, saying the pace of new cases is slowing. Dr. Anthony Fauci, CDC Director Rochelle Walensky, and FDA Chief Robert Califf were all on the hot seat. Lawmakers wanted them to outline a clear strategy to deal with monkeypox cases here in the United States. Officials saying, while the virus is still spreading in some regions, there are reasons to be optimistic. The hearing comes as the country is working to contain the largest monkeypox outbreak in the world, with more than 22,000 cases across all 50 states. Dr. John Torres is joining me now with more on this. So amidst all of this, as there is kind of now this more optimistic outlook on monkeypox, while it's rarely fatal, there has now been one case of someone who has died of monkeypox. What do we know about the situation and how it all took place?
And so the one case of somebody who died was in California. It was a person who was severely immunocompromised. And we know when that happens that something like monkeypox can actually overwhelm the body and they can end up having an issue like he did or he or she did in this case. And so, overall monkeypox, the kind we have here, which is called clade 2, it's the second type of virus because monkeypox has a clade 1, which is typically higher mortality rate. It's more dangerous. This is clade 2. It doesn't seem to be as dangerous, and for most people, it just is more of an inconvenience over time, and then they recover from it. But it can be a bad inconvenience, and don't get me wrong. And at the same time, what you're mentioning is what the White House is talking about. They're trying to get a handle on it. Cases are coming down with the eye on will they start going up, and that's what they want to make sure it doesn't happen.
So there was this warning from the FDA about the possible mutation, right, of monkeypox, and it's because if in fact TPOXX, I believe, is that what it's called? The antiviral drug TPOXX is overused. How could this happen, and how do we avoid the mutation?
And it has to do with mutations, which are kind of like the variants that we've been talking about with coronavirus. And so once somebody gets these antivirals, if they don't take the full antiviral or it's not fully effective, then the actual virus can mutate around that, and the ones that survive have a mutation that lets them survive, and if that carries on, then that can go ahead and defeat the antiviral medication. We've seen it happen with the flu. We've seen it happen with antibacterials, with bacteria, and we know it can happen with viruses too. So what the FDA is saying is this should be reserved for people who need it. In other words, those that are more at risk of being susceptible to the virus itself and are immunocompromised, pregnancy, smaller children, those types of situations, that can be the issue, and those are the ones they should be reserved for. If somebody's otherwise healthy, they have the rash, they seem to be doing okay, then maybe not give it to them.
Just kind of grin and bear it and get through it.
Exactly.
Yeah. Dr. John Torres, as always, thank you.
You bet.
Good to see you. All right, so trouble for Hall of Famer quarterback Brett Favre involving the attempted misuse of federal welfare funds. Never before seen text messages from 2017 show Favre allegedly coordinating with Mississippi's then governor Phil Bryant to funnel at least $5 million in welfare funds to build a volleyball gym at the University of Southern Mississippi. The messages, they were released in a court filing this week. They show Favre and a state nonprofit executive, Nancy New, coordinating about the funds. At one point, Favre asking this: if you were to pay me, is there any way the media can find out where it came from and how much? The alleged scheme is part of the largest case of public fraud in Mississippi history. NBC's Ken Delanian is on this for us. Wow, a lot of incriminating messages here, Ken, to say the least. What else came out of these text messages?
Yeah, Yasmin, it really is remarkable. So this scandal's been brewing for a couple of years now, and it's long been known that Brett Favre got millions of dollars that was intended for poor women and children in the nation's poorest state. But Favre has always insisted that he didn't know it was welfare money. What these texts today show is that they don't say for sure he knew it was welfare money, but they make it clear he knew it was coming from the Department of Human Services, the agency that caters to poor people in Mississippi and that administers the federal welfare program, and that he had help from the then Republican governor, Phil Bryant, who basically sent him to the welfare agency and instructed the welfare agency to give him this money to construct this volleyball facility at the University of Mississippi where his daughter was on the team. And when the $4.4 million wasn't enough, they added on another $1.1 million and said it was for radio spots, radio ads that were never undertaken. So, look, there are state and federal criminal investigations into this. 2 people have already been charged with state crimes. The FBI is investigating. There's no indication that Favre is under investigation right now, but there's a lot more to be learned about this story.
What are Favre and his attorney saying about this, Ken?
They're saying that he behaved. I talked to Favre's lawyer. He said that Brett Favre behaved honorably from the start of this. He did pay back the $1.1 million that was given directly to him, and that he never knew it was welfare money. And former Governor Phil Bryant's lawyer is essentially not commenting on the text, not disputing their authenticity. And there's a woman named Nancy New, you mentioned, who was essentially doling out this money. She has pleaded guilty, and she is cooperating with state and federal prosecutors. Yes.
Are his attorneys, Ken, at all worried that Favre could be under investigation soon, considering the large amount of money in which he received, and now this evidence that has emerged of him kind of knowing that the money that he was receiving, it seems, was not necessarily coming from a place that would look good if the media were to find out?
It's a great question. Farr's lawyer told me that the FBI spoke to him some time ago, more than a year ago, and that he hasn't heard from law enforcement recently. But these new texts sure do raise a lot of questions, not only about what you just described, but also concocting a story that didn't seem to be true about the $1.1 million. Because if you recall, previously we had reported that it was supposed to be paid to Brett Favre for speeches that the state auditor said he never gave. Yeah. Now we're seeing these texts. That wasn't even the case. That was just a fig leaf. This was designed to add more money to that volleyball project that was in part to benefit Brett Favre's daughter.
Ken Delaney for us. Thank you so much, Ken. Good to talk to you. That's a wrap for this hour, everybody. We're going to have more for you here tomorrow, same time, same place. Have a good evening.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.